Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since I discovered Spotify for Podcasters, I feel like I've been having a lot more connection with my listeners through the Q&As and polls. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Hi everyone, I'm Amber Rose, the religious hippie, and welcome to A Catholic's Perspective. For those of you just finding this podcast, let me tell you a little about myself. I was born and raised a cradle Catholic until I fell away from the church for 8 years. I just recently came back to the church, and I could not be happier with where I am today. I am currently a junior in college, and I'm studying graphic design. I am an ambassador for multiple amazing Catholic Christian companies, and I love working with all of them. Now, some of you may already know me from my popular religious hippie social media channels, such as TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I have all kinds of Catholic content on there, so don't forget to go check those out. So the reason I wanted to start a podcast was so that I'd be able to have a longer format which people could listen to from wherever they are. I particularly wanted to address issues that young Catholics face today in the secular world, and I want to do that by providing information along with commentary and even a little of my own opinion. I can't lie, from time to time I might be discussing very controversial issues, and some will find my opinions unappealing. But I do this out of my faith and service to God. We must keep communicating with each other, respecting each other, and put each other on the path to sainthood. I think you'll enjoy the podcasts coming up, and I thank you for being here with me. Hi everyone, welcome back to my podcast. Today I have a special guest with me here, John Shaw. He's one of my friends. He's really good at singing. He loves Gregorian chant, and he's also a Catholic YouTuber. So welcome, John.
Thank you, Amber, for having me.
Yeah,
Yes,
of course.
my name is John Shaw. I'm 23 and I'm a cradle Catholic. I love to sing. As you said, I've been singing since the age of 9. I've been touring. I've toured Canada, China, Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, Germany, and Austria, and across the US for singing. So that's super cool. And last year I graduated from college studying music and business.
Wow.
And right now I cantor at my parish every Sunday, and then I sing for weddings and funerals throughout the week. And then when I'm not singing at Mass, as you said, I'm a Catholic YouTuber. I love making YouTube videos about the Catholic faith and sacred music. So on my channel, you could find a lot of Gregorian chants. I do daily live streams of the Holy Rosary in Latin. And I just started learning and chanting Compline, which are the nighttime prayers in the Divine Office. So I really enjoy those things, and YouTube's awesome. And I pray that it's glorifying God. And I think it's a great way to evangelize.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So you've been so many places. Wow.
Yeah, very fortunate. Toured with a lot of choirs. So I started in the All-American Boys Chorus when I was 9 and toured with them to some of the places I mentioned. And then I also toured with my college choir to some of those other places. So super fun.
Wow, you've been all over the place. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Wow. Okay, well, that's awesome. So today we're basically talking about the things we love about the traditional Latin Mass. This was John's idea for this podcast, and I'm like super excited about it because I haven't even covered the TLM really on my podcast. So I think this will be a great way to kickstart it. So basically, do you want to go like you have one, like you list a reason why and then I list a reason why, or do you want me to list all 3 reasons why and then you list your reasons why?
Oh, I think we could just go in order. I think I have some points that if you don't touch on them, I think I could bring up a couple points too, like in
Oh, yeah.
your favorite
Perfect.
reasons, you know?
All right. Well, we'll dive into mine first then, I guess, right?
Yeah, sounds good.
The first thing that I personally love about the traditional Latin Mass is the reverence for the Eucharist. I just think that it's something that's so prominent in the traditional Latin Mass, and you don't see it too often in like Novus Ordo parishes, even though I do go to a very traditional Novus Ordo parish when I cannot make it to the traditional Latin Mass, which they are actually getting a traditional Latin Mass there. So I'm like psyched. But um, just in general, like being in the presence of Jesus Christ himself, people who go to the traditional Latin Mass, usually that they know why they're there. They're not going just because it's another day, like it's a Sunday and it's a routine. They actually know why they're going. The priests are always super strict about communion usually, and it's just it just has this whole other feeling to it spiritually. I mean, you just know for a fact that the people who are there understand the importance of who they are in front of and what they are receiving, from kneeling and receiving communion on the tongue to the parents making sure that the little kids are, the ones who just came out of First Holy Communion or whatever, are receiving properly and going to confession before they receive, if they are in mortal sin, and making sure that their kids understand the importance of this reverence we have towards the Eucharist.
Exactly. Yeah. You brought this up as well, but you mentioned kneeling, or you mentioned on the tongue, and I think that's the most reverent way to receive. Also, we can get into just the particles of Jesus in the host, and I think it's when you receive on the tongue, it's the best way and most respectful way.
Mm-hmm.
And then also kneeling as like a position to receive. I think it's very humbling and also very reverent. Yeah, and then another cool thing I heard from an altar server friend. I haven't read this yet, but I didn't know this. After the priest touches the consecrated host in the traditional Latin Mass, he keeps his fingers together, like his index and his thumb,
Yes.
until he washes his hands. I thought that was such a cool little thing that often goes unnoticed. Like I didn't know that.
There's so many details that people just don't notice or realize unless they actually ask or dig deeper into their faith. And that is something that they do. I actually heard that before. And
Mhm.
the next time I went to the TLM, I would like stared at the priest. I was just like, "You doing it?" And he
Yeah,
did it. And he did it every single time. And now it's kind of like my favorite thing to do and like to watch for.
yeah,
But
that's gonna be me this week. Yeah.
I love it because we as Catholics believe that even the smallest particle of the Eucharist, if it has fallen on the ground, it is the equivalent of the entire body of Jesus Christ being on the ground. So even the smallest particle of the Eucharist is the entire body of Jesus Christ. So 100%. I love it. I love it. All right. Second thing I love is the modesty. This could be this is basically like physical, mentally, and just spiritually in general. I'll hit on the physical first. I've never gone to a traditional Latin Mass where I have seen the girls wear booty shorts or leggings, or, well, obviously leggings, but like there's a dress over it or something, I have never seen them wear spaghetti straps. I have never seen the boys come in their pajamas wearing hoodies. Like everyone is very nicely dressed. And even though it's not like we're going to a gala or anything like that, people are very respectful in the way that they dress, and they're respectful of who they are in front of, but also of the other people around them, and not distracting them from what is super important. The other thing mentally is that at the traditional Latin Mass, I never see kids. Kids goof off all the time. I notice that a lot, but they're not like on their phones, and parents really aren't on their phones, and things like that. Whereas I've noticed at other parishes I have gone to that are more modern, the parents are on the phones, the kids are acting up or eating, Cheetos and drinking Mountain Dew. It's always just like, no, don't
Yeah.
let your kids eat Mountain Dew. And I was about to say, don't let your kids eat Mountain Dew and drink Cheetos. Dyslexia. And then of course, spiritually, I think I've never really heard people talk during mass at a traditional Latin mass. I've never heard people just like chitter chatter before or after mass. Everyone is usually very respectful and quiet and reverent before mass. After mass, people will gather outside and chit chat, but they know that that time before mass starts is for prayer and reflection.
Yeah, I think you summed it up perfectly. I think it's just important to understand where you are and to be as respectful as you can
Yes.
when you're at mass.
Yes, absolutely. Because we're sitting in front of the King of Kings.
Yep.
And then my last little thing is it's the mass that the saints attended. The traditional Latin mass is one of those masses that some of your favorite saints have. It's what they were raised with, like Saint Therese of Lisieux, Padre Pio. I believe that was the mass that Padre Pio said. Correct? I think so.
Oh, I think so. I think all the
Yeah.
saints except for John Paul II.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And so all the saints from like pre-Vatican II and all those people and stuff, they were raised on the traditional Latin mass. And I'm just saying, like, if we want to be saints one day, they are a great example of what should be expected from us, and what a better way to for them to be an example to us than for us to actually be involved in the mass that they were involved in, and are gifted the spiritual I guess I was going to say spiritual medicine from the traditional Latin mass that they received. And the songs that I'm sure you've sang a lot of Gregorian chant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like the songs that you've sung and the songs that we hear in the traditional Latin mass every Sunday are the same songs that the saints reflected on and, just thought about and, just, it's so interesting to me how it's the same thing that people I have looked up to for so many years, like St. Francis of Assisi and St. Clare of Assisi, and they literally pondered the exact same music, the same verses, it's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, it's a cool thought. And I think you summed it up well again. If we're trying to be like the saints, why not also attend the mass that they attended?
Exactly.
I think that's a good point.
I love it. Is that your only
Oh yeah.
thing there? Okay, perfect.
When you put the bullet point, that's exactly what I thought of, and you just took all the words out of my mouth. That's what I was going to say.
I love it. All right, so now your turn. Let's go. What you got?
So the first thing I thought of that I love about the traditional Latin mass, I mean, both, but let me get into it. So the traditional Latin mass is scriptural. It's based in scripture. The Psalms are an obvious example. So like, this is technically before the mass starts, but if there's an entrance antiphon, like in the high mass, like the Asperges, that's a psalm. And then the Gloria Patri, which is the Glory Be prayer. So there's a whole bunch of psalms in the mass, and there's too many occurrences to like list them all. But even the collects, like those are a collection of prayers of all the faithful assisting at the Holy Mass, the holy sacrifice of the Mass. And then we get into the epistle, which is a reading taken from the Bible. And the goal of the epistle is to teach some truth God wishes his people to know and practice. And then the gospel is pretty obvious, it's just directly from the Bible. And then there's the gradual, consisting of like a response and a verse, which is the remnant of the whole psalm. And yeah, basically everything is scriptural. And I kind of went in order. I haven't even gotten to the offertory yet. So like just understanding that like everything is based in scripture. There's a reason behind everything, every action, everything is pretty biblical based. It's amazing.
For sure. And the thing is that it's not going to be explicitly stated in the Bible. Like the Catholic Church is the traditional Latin Mass, and traditional Latin Mass isn't in the Bible. But then again, we have to understand that neither is the word Trinity. Like there are things in the Bible that aren't going to be in the Bible, but it's still in there. It's just you got to go underneath the surface level to understand and find it. And so when it comes to that type of thing, I completely agree. When I first read the Bible, when I came back into my faith, I was going through all of this and I was just like, how could anyone who reads the Bible not understand that the Bible is Catholic? I mean, even if you didn't understand that like Catholics compiled the Bible, even if you didn't know that, how could you not look at it and read through it without a surface level understanding and say, oh, Catholics aren't biblical? Like it's almost impossible. And so for people to say that, it's like, well, I have to understand that many people do not have the entire Bible. They have an altered Bible and words have been removed or added and they had books taken out. So I give them some grace there. But then I'm also just kind of like, what happened to, the whole not going off your own understanding and anyway. And so it's just very interesting to me when I went through the Bible, I'm like, I found the entire mass in there. And I was just like, how do people think the Catholic mass isn't biblical? Like it's literally there. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Totally. Should we get into the next point? I think it's super interesting. I often attend the High Mass with the Gregorian chant and all of that stuff. There's some differences I can briefly touch on, but what do you often attend? Do you go to the Low Mass or?
I try to go to the 7:30, which is a low mass, but when I do when it's like when it's like a feast day or something, I try to go to the high mass. Isn't the high mass longer than the low mass?
It should be. Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I love the music, but a lot of the times the high mass happens around 12:30 or 5 p.m. and those are like my productive times. And so I try to go to like the really early masses, but I definitely make it a thing to at least attend the high mass, every now and then. Yeah.
Yeah, well, both are super special and beautiful in their own way. I think the Low Mass is nicknamed the Quiet Mass, or often referred to as the Quiet Mass. It's super, I love the simplicity of the Low Mass. I've only been to one Low Mass in my life. So maybe if you could touch on it a little bit more, I don't know if I'm leaving stuff out or if I misrepresent it, I don't know. But let's see, I think it's super meditative, like with the silence in the Low Mass. Just a lot of time for prayer and just, I think the simplicity is so beautiful, just meditating on what's actually going on.
Yes.
And
yeah. It's very quiet, but the main thing is that the priest doesn't really acknowledge us all that much. There's usually no music. It's very quiet, contemplative. We usually don't respond. We respond quietly, like prayerfully. So when he does the whole what is it, oh my gosh, I'm blanking, but the et cum spiritu tuo that we respond with is usually very quiet. We usually either whisper it or we're completely silent. And so when it comes to stuff like that, it's very, I don't know, it's very relaxing. I almost focus better when I attend it. Just because of the fact that I am very scatterbrained. But when I'm in mass and I'm able to follow along just in my head without like, I don't know, like a lot of talking or anything like that, like when it's really quiet, I focus a lot better. But then of course he has, there's the gospel that he says quietly and then he comes over and then he gives the homily, goes back. So if you do go to a low mass, I highly suggest bringing a missal with you or reading the gospel for that mass, because you are not going to actually verbally hear it. He's going to basically whisper it and then give a homily about it. I know that some churches, they do say it verbally, like they will, they'll say the gospel verbally, but mine does not. So
interesting. Yeah. I think someone asked like, why isn't it more responsive or something like that, about like the traditional Latin Mass. And I was like, well, it's not really exactly directed towards you all the time, know, like some of the prayers are directed to God, not you,
Exactly. And I
Um,
think that's the biggest thing is we forget that like the mass isn't about us, you know? I mean,
yeah,
it definitely involves us, but it's not about us.
exactly. Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah,
what we owe God, and it's about our duty as Catholics fulfilling that duty. So when people say like, ugh, I can't hear what he's saying or blah blah this or blah blah that, I'm like, well, that's because it's not about you. I mean, the
yeah.
homily is absolutely the
Uh-huh.
homily is when they convict people and they share love and they explain the gospel and stuff. But the mass itself is not for us. I mean, God gave it to us as a gift to experience heaven on earth, but it is not about us. It's for us.
Exactly. Yeah. And then let's get into the high mass.
I love high mass.
Um, yeah, that's when you'll hear the Gregorian chant, which I love. Um, a little bit of, oh, should I touch on like briefly the differences? I'm reading off of the
Yeah.
back of my red missal that they hand out.
Oh yeah, I love that thing. Yeah.
They hand it out at your parish too.
We got
The,
new ones, but we did have those for a long time.
Gotcha. Yeah, so on the back, like I'm literally reading the low
Quote.
mass, two lighted candles on the altar, one priest who does not sing, no prayers of the mass are sung or chanted. And then, have you seen this? A choir may sing hymns, or there may be no singing. I
Yes.
don't. Okay, hymns too.
Yeah,
Um,
sometimes.
okay, gotcha. And with the two lighted candles, I think that just adds to like the simplicity.
Mhm.
Maybe. I mean, there
Yeah.
might be some more significance, but that's my first
Yeah, it's usually
guess.
very quiet and he doesn't move around too much. And so I think it's just like a stationary way of just like it's quiet, it's darker, and it's more conformed to one area.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. And then there's the high mass, which is the sung mass. Six lighted candles on the altar. One priest who chants or sings various parts of the mass. The priest intones the Gloria and the Creed. He chants the Gospel, the preface, the Our Father. And then there's the proper prayers like the introit, the collect or collects, depending on the Sunday. Offertory and the post communion are chanted by the Scala or the choir. And then the choir sings the Gloria, the Creed, the Sanctus, and Agnus
I love
Dei,
it.
like the mass parts. And then there's like the solemn high mass, which is like special. Like there's a priest assisted by a deacon or subdeacon, and I've actually never been to one of those.
Yeah, I went to one for Easter and Palm Sunday, and they were awesome, but they were long.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I was sitting next to two little restless kids, which I love kids and they were the cutest, but I was just like, "Oh my gosh, you guys
Well,
gonna hurt
probably
yourselves."
a super special mass.
Yes.
Yeah, especially on Easter. Yeah,
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I love that. It's
yeah.
so cool to see the differences and yet, they all offer their own spiritual guidance. I love it.
hmm Not to take away from the low mass, but I think I've read that the high mass was like the official or
Yes,
like the original mass, not
correct.
to take
Yes.
away from the low mass. The low mass is special too. Um,
If they just had the high mass a little earlier, but you can't have it earlier. It's literally there's specific times you're supposed to have the masses at, and yeah.
oh yeah, totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Gregorian chant, one of my favorite things is in the high mass. And it's awesome once you like understand exactly what Gregorian chant is. It's not just like a musical style.
Mhm.
Um, Gregorian chant, first and foremost, is prayer, which I think is super cool. Once someone understands that, it's one of the highest forms of prayer. Chant is the official musical prayer of the church. And from my research, from the trusty Wikipedia, I don't know how.
We love Wikipedia.
Yeah, I think chant was composed around like the 9th and 10th centuries.
Yeah.
And for context, the oldest surviving complete musical composition is the epitaph of Seculos, which
Hmm.
I learned in music history, one of those music classes I took in college. We had like listening quizzes and
I love it. I
um,
know Gregorian chant though, the name didn't it come from a pope who compiled like a bunch of old parchment papers together from old time music? Like it got its name from the Pope that kind of
I
compiled
think
it?
so. Yeah. I think one of the popes is credited to creating or compiling, like you said, Gregorian chant.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's not that the chants are old. That's not why they're special. um, they were specifically composed for the divine liturgy of the Mass and the divine office, which is awesome. And they're composed to Scripture, which goes back to that the Mass is based on Scripture,
Right.
which I think is cool. And the Gregorian chant pieces, this is just like the music nerd coming out, are so beautiful and well constructed. A couple Sundays ago, the third Sunday after Pentecost.
Okay.
This is just one detail that like I nerded out on. Like Zion in the Bible, like how it's a
Yeah.
mountain range.
Yeah.
Well, in Latin, it's like Sion,
Right.
but around that, where that word was, there was an ascending and descending melody, and it happened like 3 times. And it's just like beautiful text painting. Like it was super cool because like the
That's
melody
so
line
cool.
looks like mountains, and it was
Right.
beautiful.
I love that. That's so
Yeah.
neat.
Yeah, that's just like the musical appreciation coming out. But the number one is that it's prayer, and
Right.
then number 2, that the chants are specifically for the worship and glory of God. So I think that's why Gregorian chant is so special. And especially during this time, I think we all need to pray. I encourage everyone to sing Gregorian chant and to think of it as prayer because it is, and
Right.
it doesn't matter how good your voice is. I think that's important to touch on too. Because people are like, oh, like I don't have the best singing voice, but it's prayer. And if you think of it like that, and that it's for glorifying God,
Right.
not to just sound good, like
I have to say, like, when I'm in church, like, I take voice lessons. Like, I think I'm a fairly okay singer. Like, I'm not the best. I'm not John Shaw, but I'm pretty good.
oh gosh.
But like when I'm singing in church, I sound like I'm a cackling old crone or something. I'm like, ha! Like it sounds so bad. But there's this beautiful, beautiful old lady there who just has the most angelic voice. And I'm just like, I'm gonna stop singing so you can sing. But what you're saying totally makes sense. So you know what? My cackly voice is gonna join in too.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that's why, I love Gregorian chant and it's super special. If you think of it more than just like a musical style, like we
Right.
also like other types of music, but that it's specifically for the liturgy and for prayer, I think it's super special.
Exactly.
Another thing we could get into is the actual language, it's in Latin.
I love Latin.
I'm still learning about it. We talked last week about the difference between like classical and ecclesiastical Latin.
Blessed and blessed. I can't.
That
I
too.
can't.
Every time I cantor, because I also cantor English masses, I see that all over the place now. It lives in my brain rent free.
It's like, which one is it?
Yeah, and there is some.
No, I know what you mean. No, I think Latin has this powerful something that people don't understand today is that some demons cannot actually be exorcised without the use of Latin. And so when people as a dead language or it isn't important, I'm just like, okay, well, and some exorcisms aren't going to be effective unless you actually use Latin. I mean, that's just a common fact, and so many exorcists will back you up on that.
Yeah. Well, I actually watched Father Ripperger about this. A lot of my points that I want to touch on are from him. So yeah, I'm not like plagiarizing. I want to expand on the points, but like I quote Father Ripperger. Yeah, about the exorcist and stuff like that. He was saying when he does the exorcisms, right? That's what
Yes,
they're called.
yes.
Yeah. If the demons had to say something in Latin, I think he said they would try to go to the classical modern way of saying it, which was like the language back then,
Yes.
And he said I'm not going to let them get away with it. And yeah, because there's ecclesiastical Latin, which is sacred, and that's the form of pronunciation, which is sacred. So I thought
Yes.
that was super cool when he said that, like super interesting. And he said, not only is Latin in scripture, because some people like just see that and they think that's why it's a sacred language, but not only that, Latin is one of the three languages fixed to the instrument of our salvation, which is the cross. That's a
Yes.
direct quote from him. And so that's why I think we use like Greek and Hebrew and Latin in the traditional Latin Mass. Like the Kyrie is Greek,
Yeah.
and then like the words Amen and
So many
Alleluia
people think it's Latin,
are,
and I'm like, no.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So like I'll do like videos on my YouTube channel and be like, okay, like this is how you sing some of the songs in the traditional Latin Mass. And like, you have to
Yeah.
have the title of the video, which is like what people click on or search for. And then there's always someone in the comments like, Kyrie is Greek, right?
Yeah.
Just to
All the
like
time.
be, I'm right.
Yep.
um, super funny. But this was a really cool point that Father Ripperger made. In the old rite, the traditional Latin Mass, there are rubrics that nothing is to be used in the Mass that is not blessed or sacred. So, like the
Right.
candles will be blessed, the vestments, the chalice has to be consecrated beforehand, and then same with the language. So, like, that's why we use Greek, Hebrew, and Latin, which
Right.
goes back to the three languages that are fixed on the cross.
Right. And the other thing, just to piggyback off of that, is at the traditional Latin Mass, when we use um, Latin, like you
Mhm.
said, John, demons cannot stand Latin.
Yeah.
Like they cannot stand it at all. And so you won't find actually any demons at the traditional Latin Mass, not just because of Latin, but also because at the beginning, before the Mass even begins, the priest will invoke Our Lady, and the demons cannot stand her. And so
Yeah.
that was another thing that I noticed, where I was just like, spiritually, I feel more fulfilled at the traditional Latin Mass.
Mhm.
And that's not to diss on Novus Ordo. That's just a personal fact of mine. I don't know if there's other people that feel that way out there. And I still do attend my traditional Novus Ordo, parish. It's very trad-like, and I love it. But it just doesn't fulfill me the same way that the TLM does.
Right. Well, I think there's a lot more reverence in the traditional Latin Mass,
Mm-hmm.
but there are people that can't go to a traditional Latin Mass based off of their location and stuff. And I think it's important to say um, traditional Latin Mass, or if you can't, just try to find the most reverent church or parish that you can, do your
Yep.
best. But the reverence in the traditional Latin Mass is unmatched.
Yes, 100%. None of this modern stuff. If you guys go to a modern church, leave.
Yeah.
don't,
Yeah.
don't. Find some place that is actually Catholic. So 100%, 100%. Oh my goodness. Was that all your points?
Pretty much. I mean, there's a couple other things like the traditional Latin Mass. I mean, like why Latin again? Like
Mm-hmm.
because if we're having the traditional Latin Mass and everything's blessed, why is that so important? Because
Right,
everything in heaven is holy,
right.
and yeah, like the Mass, we're in the presence of God, which I mean goes back to everything we just talked about with like the reverence and everything being blessed. So yeah, just I love it. I love the traditional Latin Mass. It's awesome.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things where I think I feel like my faith is more strongly integrated into the traditional Latin Mass than it is
Mhm.
at any others. And many people want me to try Eastern rites and things like that. And I think their Mass is beautiful, and I think their traditions are great. They apparently don't even have pews 90% of the time. Like they stand for most of their Masses. And I think that is awesome because, fun fact, pews were actually integrated from Protestantism.
Yeah.
Um,
I knew that.
Catholic churches never originally had them. But I don't think they're a bad thing, to be honest, especially if you have
Right.
elderly people and they need to sit and moms have kids and so yeah. But
Mhm.
it's just one of those things that I always feel more like, you know, my faith is integrated into it. And I think it's also important to just put at the end here that for those who are listening who might not be Catholic and don't understand what the Catholic Mass is, it's an important thing to remember that the Catholic Church does not teach that the Mass is the re-crucifixion of Jesus. I have so many people constantly telling me that it's like we're re-crucifying Jesus and stuff. He does
Oh,
not
interesting.
suffer. Yeah, it's crazy. He does not suffer. He does not die again. However, the Catholic Church does teach that the Mass is the representation, okay, the representation of the sacrifice of Jesus on Calvary that he made for all of mankind. So it's not, it's literally not like, it's the remembrance, it's the representation. We are not re-crucifying him. I just wanted to throw that in there because I've gotten so many comments about that in the past, and I'm just like, got to touch on that. So yeah.
Oh yeah, I think that's important. I've never heard that before.
Really?
Well, I've never heard that like criticism before,
Yeah, you
thinking.
get a lot of it once you're on the internet for too long.
Yeah.
You start hearing everything. Well, no, those are some great points. So I absolutely love that we were able to do this and spread a little bit more light on why we love the traditional Latin Mass. Do you have any last words for anyone who might be looking to get into the traditional Latin Mass, where to start, etc.?
Oh yeah. Well, I think we barely scratched the surface. There's so much, and these are just some of our thoughts. We're not experts
Part
necessarily.
two, part two.
Yeah, I mean, got to think of some more points. I mean, these were some good points too. Um, what was the question again? Like, where?
Basically, just if anyone's interested in the traditional Latin Mass, things that they should prep for, bring, or something like that.
Oh yeah. There's a couple books that. What is the book called? Like the traditional Latin Mass explained. I think
Yes.
that maybe getting a missal. I like the Father Lassance missal. Um, just understanding what's going on during the Mass. It took me a long time to of actually going every Sunday. Probably
Mhm.
took me like 3 or 4 months, like to like fully understand like, okay, so this is what's happening during the Mass. Or like this is why he's saying this certain prayer. So just it's going to take a while. It's not going to be like day one you're going to get everything, but just doing your best and understanding what's going on during the Mass. And then I said this before, but just finding the most reverent Mass you can, and if that's a traditional Latin Mass, definitely give it a try if you haven't gone. And we love the traditional Latin Mass. You should go.
Absolutely. And I know you've been singing in the church for a while, like you mentioned earlier. Can you talk a little bit more about like your favorite songs and like how you
Oh
got
yeah.
more into singing and stuff like that?
Yeah. When I was in college, I went to a Lutheran university, and they had their chapel and everything, like every week that was like through the school. And I went, and it's like, okay, like it doesn't feel the same, obviously. And there was a church right across the street, like a Catholic church. So then I went with my confirmation sponsor, now confirmation sponsor. He's my best friend in college, and now,
I love it.
and we went to Mass together. And then I was like, you know what, like I like their music program. Let me go talk to them. And then I started cantering at that church. And then, yeah, so I started doing like one Mass on Sundays through that church, and doing school, and doing the choir concerts and all of
Wow.
that. And that's when I really started to like learn the ropes of, cantering and stuff. And when you lead, like as part of the Mass, I guess, like as a cantor, it's so different. Like, you know, when you're like sitting in the pews, you could fall back on everyone, like, oh, they stand up, so I stand up. So
Yeah,
um
yeah, yeah.
or they kneel at this time, or they genuflect. So it was just like, whoa, like I need to really learn it, like, and like know it like the back of my hand.
Right.
um so then I cantored there for a while, and then back to the All-American Boys Chorus when I was 9. The guy that ran the All-American Boys Chorus reached out to me like, hey, there's another cantoring opportunity. Are you available to like cantor at this parish too? So then for a while and doing school, I did cantoring at that parish. And then I went and drove to Irvine and cantored in the first parish that I did.
Mhm.
And then I went back and did the traditional Latin Mass, which was my first like
Oh, wow.
exposure to it. I did not know that the Latin Mass was a thing like before that, like seriously, and super thankful that everything lined up the way it did. And
That is
now
so cool.
I just sing at that parish. Like I took the spot in between, so I do 3 to 4 masses on Sunday, including the Latin Mass.
Wow.
And that's how I got into it. That's my full story.
That is so cool. What's your responsibilities as a cantor?
Oh yeah. Well, we introduce the hymns for the English masses and say like, this is the number of the hymn and stuff. It's really to lead and to encourage them to sing.
Yeah,
and
no, I
and
get it.
then and then
But like the spotlight is on you. Like you can't afford to mess up.
true. I also like to think of it as it's not about me. Of
Mhm.
course, as a cantor, it's just to maybe enhance or like, yeah, enhance their time at mass.
Right.
It's not like a performance. And there were some people that I've worked with, at different parishes that weren't Catholic, and they treated it like a performance, unfortunately,
Ooh,
which is
yikes.
why I'm not there anymore. So
There are
uh,
reasons for things. I was gonna say, because like, yeah, I've been to Novus Ordo parishes where after a hymn, like they'll clap, and I'm like, what?
yeah. But your responsibility is it's part of the mass, and just it's for God, it's not for you, and I mean, there's different responsibilities for the Latin Mass and the English, but like for the Gregorian chants, I'll intone the chants, and then the choir will come in, or the men will come in and sing the rest with me and stuff like that. So
Very cool.
really enjoy it. Yeah, it's a great part, especially with my love for singing, and then just the extra significance of it being for God makes it super special. It's not just to sing.
Right. No, absolutely. Okay, I'll stop picking your brain after this last question.
Oh yeah,
What
no
are
problem.
like your top favorite hymns and Gregorian chant, or just songs in general that you sing at mass?
Oh, that's right. You asked that.
Oh, did I?
I think so. You said like, what's your favorite hymn? I mean, I think
Maybe I don't
Gregorian
know.
chant. Gregorian chant. I'll start with that. And I'm still learning a whole bunch of Gregorian chants. Like this is my first, because of like our 2020.
Right.
This is like my first full year of doing the traditional Latin Mass, and like knowing as much, because I was still learning 3 years ago, and then 2020, and then now there's this year. I really
Right.
like Veni Creator Spiritus, which was a Pentecost hymn.
Oh.
That's one of my favorites for that season. I love Salve Regina, both of them, the simple tone and the solemn tone. The solemn tone took so long to learn, but it's super special. And from learning the divine office, or just Compline so far, I think solemn is for like special feast days or Sundays, and gave it more significance than just like, oh, this is it's a different sound.
Right.
They mean different things, and they're 4 different times. Love the Salve Regina. And then of course there's like the Ave Maria version of a
Mhm.
Gregorian chant. I really love the mass parts, like the mass ordinaries, I think they're
Yeah.
called. Yeah. Like the Mass of the Angels is done a lot, but I do love that. And then just there's certain other masses like Mass 4 I like. Yeah, just super special, and each mode we can get into I'll say this really I'll say this really quickly because it's like super in depth. Like each mode of a Gregorian chant, I mean, like it's not like a key signature, like how you would think of music, like modern music, but there's different modes, and it doesn't matter what pitch you start on a Gregorian chant, but each mode, which is like there's mode 1 through 8, has a different flavor of sound and like a different mood. Like it, like it's super cool. And there's certain, like, you could say themes that happen all the time in different Gregorian chants. And one of my favorite ones is like do 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 do, like that. It happens in Salve Regina. It happens in the Ave Maria. It happens in so many of the mass chants in like the propers.
Yeah.
And it's just like the playing with and like the composition of like the half steps and like the added flat and stuff. Just it sounds so cool. And there's again like the Gregorian chants are so well crafted. I love them all, but like those are some of my favorites. And then favorite hymns. I tend to love some of the more traditional hymns. There's the let me open up my hymnal real quick.
I know there's so many. And the thing is that so many people, like there's some really cringy modern hymns out there, and that's why I love the traditional Latin mass hymns.
Yeah. One of my favorites, I don't know how traditional it is, but I really love Be Thou My Vision. And then there's the other one, Lord of All Hopefulness, that is the same melody. And it's funny, some people like to mix and match the ornamentation in both of those hymns. So it's super funny to see like the words of Be Thou My Vision, but with like the eighth notes and ornamentation of the Lord of All Hopefulness.
Right.
That's one of my favorite melodies. One that I sang last week that I really love the lyrics to is When in Our Music God is Glorified. And there's a line that just like it made me think, it's like super cool. It's let me find it. And adoration leaves no room for pride. And I just thought that was like a really cool thing, because
I love it.
If it just puts everything in the right perspective, like we're there for mass, we're there to adore Jesus, and we're in front of the Blessed Sacrament. And if you like really have God in the center of your life, there's no room for, you're not the reason of the mass. You're not as important as God.
Right. No, absolutely. I think it really puts us in our place. And the other thing I love about the music at the traditional Latin mass is that there's no inappropriate instruments. There's no drums, there's no guitars, no tambourines or pianos or
I read a paper about that in
cymbals.
college. Yeah. In one of the documents, now it says like, I think, I'm going off of memory here. Just that it's like it needs to be done respectfully, and that like, that it should be respectful for God, but that you could do your own interpretation about that. It's not black and white. So like organ, of course, it says like that's the highest instrument, like, and always the most reverent. But like you could take that and interpret it like, well, I'm playing this tambourine really respectfully,
No, I know. I think the main thing is that so many, I think it was a Pope who said it, that those types of instruments should be banned from the mass, but I forget which Pope. I would have to look it up. But I think the reason was because in the midst of the Protestantism, in the 1500s, they brought in a lot of irreverent music and a lot of irreverent instruments and things of that nature, and made it more into what we now have today, known as, rock concerts and mega churches. And I think that's kind of where it was going with, but I have heard some extremely inappropriate music at mass that sounds extremely Protestant-like, with those instruments. And so personally, I could not hear those instruments and feel like I'm in heaven, like I'm at mass. I would feel like I'm at like a Christian rock concert. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, totally. And it's funny, for like the funerals that I do and stuff, people request some songs and stuff, and we have to remind them like the music is part of the liturgy. You know, we can't sing My Way by Frank Sinatra during the liturgy. Yeah.
No, that's too funny.
That's an actual request that happened, but yeah.
Yeah, can I have My Way done by Frank Sinatra?
Yeah,
I want that play it at the reception.
Yeah, that's one thing we say, like, not necessarily with that one, but like, you know, that would be a great song for the reception, or just
or the wake or something, like something
or
that's not in the church.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm sure you guys have to put up with a lot of that sometimes and just be like, no, it's not it.
Yeah.
No, I love that. So, well, I think that touched on all of our points. So thank you so much. Where can my listeners find you on social media?
Oh yeah. My YouTube is youtube.com/John Shaw, JOHNSHAW. Love posting on there. And I mean, my Instagram and Twitter. Oh, my Instagram's the number one John Shaw, and like the number one, not spelled out. And because there's so many John Shaws, I'm so happy that like John Shaw wasn't taken for like the YouTube thing. I don't know what I would have done.
Get like John Smith. I mean, come on.
Yeah. And then my Twitter is John Shaw YouTube spelt out. Yeah, it's hard to pick a username for me.
We'll tag you in it too. We'll tag you in the show notes so that we have your
Thanks
stuff
so much.
too. Yeah.
But mostly YouTube. That's what I love to do.
Yeah, and you do a lot of great rosaries and stuff and Latin and things. I'm still working on my Latin pronunciations. It's getting there.
Oh, it's tough. Yeah, it took me a couple months.
So it's definitely a work in progress. So I feel your pain.
That's awesome.
But anyways, thank you so much for joining me on this awesome podcast.
Thank you, Amber. Yeah.
Of course. And we will have to have a part 2 sometime, and where we go more in depth into more of the details of it.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, of course. Goodbye.
Alrighty. Bye.
All right, guys. And that is the podcast for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will talk to you guys in the next podcast. Bye. Do you have questions or comments about today's episode? Email me at thereligioushippie@gmail.com or leave a voice message at anchor.fm/thereligioushippie. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for listening.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Selling a little or a lot? Do your thing however you cha-ching with Shopify, the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout. 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms. Get a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/offer23.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to rate and review this episode. This podcast is produced by Todd Fisher and distributed by Metacortex Publishing. This podcast is copyright. Any previously trademarked or copyright content is used by permission. Information and opinions stated in this podcast should not be construed as medical advice. Please be sure to visit the official website for the International Association of Metatomics at metatomics.org, or find us on social media for other unique content.